this out. Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, and today I'm hanging out with a couple of nerds from Toronto, Canadians. We've caught them. We've brought them here to Nerdarchy. We got the Dungeon Dudes, Kelly and Monty in the house, and I want to thank you guys for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank
Great
you.
to be here.
So, how are you guys doing this afternoon?
So far so good.
Yeah.
Day off for us, so
not for me.
Oh, not for Monty.
Just
for
already up and working this morning. So
well, I have a day off.
Well, that's nice. I was glad you guys were able to make it. I know Muggle jobs can get in the way of our live chats at times.
Oh yeah.
It is the Muggle job is the bane of the Nerdarchy live chat. So guys, we're trying something a little bit different. We are streaming to Facebook, to Twitch, and to YouTube at the same time. So if you happen to be watching, I do have a chat going, and it kind of aggregates them all. But maybe you're someplace where you're like, hey, I'm the only one here. Why aren't you answering me? It's because I'm aggregating the chat. So I more than likely I'll get to you at some point. So
cool.
Welcome, everyone. So you guys, what inspired you to become YouTubers, to take your passion for Dungeons and Dragons and bring it to the tubes?
Well, I know I myself have a background in film, and I actually have a little production company on the side. And I've been playing D&D with Monty for years now. And I mean, we're always joking about a way that we could bring this to a bigger audience because we love D&D so much. And I kind of just started talking to him about why don't we combine like my passion for film and filmmaking with our passion for D&D.
Yeah, I think both Kelly and I, because we have an interest in film and media in general, we've been looking for a cool project to just collaborate on as friends, and trying to do anything bigger than just doing a cute little YouTube show was kind of getting in our way, between like writing scripts and all that development stuff that you kind of run into with that. So we're just like, you know what, we play D&D every week. So let's just throw on some cameras and talk about something that we love to do together as well.
Yeah, the production background definitely shows. I'm a little sad every time I see some of the YouTubers out there that actually know how to do this techie stuff. We've been, and because it's funny, when we first got started, like we started with an iPhone and an external mic, and that was like our early videos, and we would just turn it on and talk and like going through all the, all the growing pains of growing a channel and having, technology. The D&D part's actually the easy part. It's all that other stuff.
Yeah. We still shoot with a little iPhone, and we just kind of cobble together some gear of our own. So we're still pretty lo-fi as far as it goes, but it definitely is a nice benefit. And we've got a third member of the Dungeon Dudes who's behind the camera, Clayton. And he does a huge amount of work helping us out and just keeping things coordinated for us. So it really helps to have that extra person at least, so we can focus on the writing and the content.
Yeah.
So I want to address something in the chat real quick. Oh yeah, guys, I guess I should have mentioned that. I think the USB to my webcam died just before going live. That is why you have the blank space and you did not get the beard. I'm sure I could have put like a picture in there or something, but I didn't want to blow up my computer trying. So that was why that is. So what kind of videos do you guys want to make? What kind of content are you specifically going after on your channel?
Well, I think that the original idea was me and Monty were both so passionate about D&D that we took to Facebook and we were answering a lot of people's questions on like Facebook groups or just online in general. And we kind of started making a joke about, well, what if we just made videos to answer people's questions instead, so that every time somebody asks a question that we've already answered, we just post a link to a video. And that was kind of how we started getting the ball rolling on this concept of just short videos every week, telling us or explaining rules or just how we play the game, our tips and tricks, our reviews of different modules that we've ran. It's really kind of just a mixed bag of all things that we think are important to share with the community. A
big thing that we started with is we love to accessorize at our D&D game. I have a big collection of Dwarven Forge stuff and a whole bunch of other accessories and stuff. And a lot of questions that we saw people asking are like, what are good accessories to use for your game? What are some other game aids? A big one that we're working towards is like, where do I start with miniatures and stuff like that? So we wanted to kind of have a video to answer those questions and give people more of a visual guide to that stuff. But then this year as well, like 2 of our goals is we want to make sure that we have a video where we talk about all of the new 5th edition modules, because a really common thing that we see people asking is like, is this module right for me? And oftentimes when you see people answer that question, you'll get someone answer, say, play Curse of Strahd, but they won't really say like what's in the module and what it's about without giving away a ton of spoilers. So we wanted to kind of approach that. And what we've just started doing as well is doing kind of our guides to classes, where it's really easy to Google a class guide and get a whole bunch of optimization advice that's targeted towards someone that's like wants to do all the number crunching on their characters. But our kind of approach for our class guides is to focus on role playing and inspiration, while giving a little bit of that rules advice at the same time. And that's kind of what we wanted to do a little bit differently, is rather than be like that very clinical rules heavy analysis thing. But of course we did do a video about spell casting, and that's been one of our best videos so far, of just explaining the rules on how it works.
Yeah, pretty in depth.
Now, how are you guys defining best?
So far, that's been the ones that have gotten the most traction for us. So that was one of our first videos that Reddit seemed to like.
Yeah, it hit over 1,000 views in one day, which was a record for us.
Yeah, but when we were learning the process of like looking at the analytics and seeing the videos that people really, really like, and actually the ones that do really well, according to what YouTube says, have been the ones where we talk about accessories. Like one of our first really big videos was we unboxed one of the DM screens. One of our local shops is in the WPN network, so they get all the new releases early, and we opened up the screen and showed what was inside it. And I think people really, really liked that we took that like close look at that.
Yeah, that did well.
So you guys want to tackle some random questions from the chat? Like we'll just bounce back and forth. I'll ask you guys stuff and we'll jump in the chat.
You bet. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So Garrett Bragg, he's watching from YouTube. Hey man, I play a Protector Aasimar Paladin, Oath of Devotion. We just jumped. Come back to me. How do I role play him better, or should I ask that at a later time? You can ask right now. We'll go over that right now.
Yeah.
How to role play him better?
Oh boy.
Well, so Kelly just came in our last campaign where he played an Oath of Vengeance Paladin, and I played quite a few Paladins over my time. And I think the biggest thing with role playing a character, before you even get into like what kind of accent or affect you want to have, is like really getting in touch with what your character wants and what they're feeling. As DM, one of the things that I like to ask my players is, how does your character feel about the situation? And ask yourself that question, like what is going through your mind, and get in touch with what they want and what they desire. All paladins desire justice in some way. That's usually a big theme I find with paladins. But what does justice look like to your paladin? Does that mean that is your definition of justice like peace? Does that mean that everyone has survived, or does that mean that the evildoer has been punished? And even for a devoted paladin, I think that, especially with the Oath of Devotion, I think that the question usually is not just about punishing the person, but for that person is, the Oath of Devotion is more about making sure people who have done wrong understand why what they did was wrong.
One quote that I always liked when talking about a paladin is lawful good doesn't always mean lawful nice. And really, when I made my paladin, one thing I looked at is, do they have to be like super heavy religious, by the book? And really, for me, the answer was not always. It's they were given divine powers for a reason, and what is it about their path that granted them those powers, and how are they going to use them to smite evil? Not necessarily, oh, I do everything by the rules. It's, I really want to smite evil, and for that reason, I was granted paladin powers.
Yeah, one thing that we kind of explore in our worlds is that we have an archangel that is the patron of all paladins in the world, regardless of what deity they follow, regardless of what their creed is. And that angel will shows up to every paladin and says, "You are now a paladin." And so some paladins have worked their entire life hoping that the angel will visit them. and others. Kelly's character was rotting in prison when that angel came to him, and he found new purpose in his life. So I think paladins all have a purpose. They all have a goal. And finding out like what your paladin wants is really the biggest ticket to rolling them really, really clearly in my mind.
Yeah, you know, with any type of character, it's like figuring out what motivated them to go down this path and, you know, do the thing that they're doing, right?
Yeah, I also I always talk about pop culture as a great place. We mention this in our videos a lot. Is like take a favorite pop culture icon. My paladin was heavily inspired by the Hound, with a bit of other characters mixed in there, but the Hound from Game of Thrones. I kind of turned him into a paladin and said what would happen if he was granted holy powers, which you wouldn't expect from the Hound, but there we have it.
And you know, that's a good point. And you know, modeling is always something that is very useful for coming up with characters, ideas, different ways to play them, especially if you're new to the hobby or in role playing, or you just want to try something different. You know, it's a lot easier to try and mimic something than it is to come up with it whole cloth a lot of times.
Yeah, you bet. And I think one of the cool things too is I love drawing on cliches and drawing on things like that when I'm running the game as well, because even though we've encountered things in stories and media, one of the coolest things about Dungeons and Dragons is that you kind of get to decide, like, if I was that person or if I was in that situation, what would I do? So even though you're using a stereotypical storytelling situation, because of the interactive nature of D&D, it's always going to be different than the source material that you're drawing on. And it kind of lets you, like, we've all sat and watched a movie and been like, why would that person ever do that in that situation? And in Dungeons and Dragons, you actually get to answer that question, like, for real.
So Ed does everything over on Twitch. With respect to D&D videos, how much background prep work do you devote towards it?
That's a great question.
That's a really cool question.
Me and Monty usually sit down about a week, or on every time that we film, we sit down and discuss what the next batch of videos are going to be. We film about three or four at a time, and we film those once or twice a month. And before we sit down to actually record those videos, we discuss which episodes we think people are going to want to hear about, what gaps we need to fill within the videos that we already have. And we kind of write out loose scripts for what those are going to look like. We bounce points back and forth throughout the week. And then when we get here, we sit down, we go over the scripts together, talk about any points that we want to add in. And then when we actually record, we do have outlines, but we try to just kind of talk to each other as much as possible on camera.
There's a fair amount of editing in post. With our wizard guide, when we put it out, I think we shot like something like 45 or 50 minutes worth of us talking about wizards, and we edited that down to like, it's now 27 minutes. And we had this whole section of that video where we talked about our favorite spells that only 5th edition wizards get. And I loved that section, but we had to cut it entirely because we were just like, time. So it's a bit of a back and forth process. And we've met a couple times at the start of the year. We made a huge list of all the topics that we'd like to talk about. We know that like when the new modules and hardcover books come out, we're going to want to talk about those. So most of it is really just getting ideas for what sort of episodes we want to do. And more, like, as we found more people talking to us about what our videos are, we've tried to address them. Like, recently we did our spellcasting video, and people were like, you didn't really talk a lot about rituals. So we did a whole video about rituals in 5th edition and trying to respond to that as well. I do a fair amount of research whenever we do any episode related to actual D&D rules. And I try and go back over things like sage advice and make sure that I'm really consistent with that, because one of the things that we found that we were responding to as well with seeing online discussions about people that have legitimate rules questions. We all know that, you know, the dungeon master always has the final say, and there's always room for house rules. That's what makes D&D really important. But we want to make sure that when we put our videos where we talk about the rules of D&D, that we're talking about them in the way that is most accessible to any player. So whether you're someone that's playing in Adventurers League or playing in a home game or on Roll20, you can use our videos in your game as a guideline.
I've found we found for video prep, D&D Beyond is super helpful.
Yes.
if you're using D&D Beyond and you have access to it. Well, and for anyone that just wants to look up a lot of information fast, it is super sweet to just be like, type in these keywords and boom, here's the information.
Yeah. Do you use D&D Beyond at the table during the game?
I do. When I run my actually my last in-person game, I actually said, all right, Ted, I need to use your laptop because we filmed from my laptop and set it up to use it. And we do a lot of like improv style GMing. So when I want to look up something quick, it's super useful. Or I might just have a bunch of tabs open of monsters that I think I'm going to use.
Yeah, I do the exact same thing.
And be like, boom, just bring it up. And oh my God, hover cards. I'm in love.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I found too is with D&D Beyond, like we have all the spellbook cards, but even D&D Beyond, it's so much faster to look up rules, and because the search is really, really good. And I had the master subscription and all the books, so it's just like, bam, it goes right to it.
I still feel like I'm too old school. I still have my pen and paper, and everybody else at our table is using D&D Beyond, and I have it on my phone, but I'm just sitting there scribbling notes down and looking up things in books, and everybody's laughing at me. So I don't know what it is. I really like pen and paper, but I'm starting to get used to D&D Beyond as a valid form of me running.
I have all the spell cards as well. But I always forget to bring them. I forget to use them. I forget to put my spell book together. And then if I hand them out at the table, I got to remember to collect them all. It's like
yeah.
It seemed like a cool idea at the time, anyway.
Yeah, I think if I ever, I'd use them if I was playing for sure. I also find like I'm not gonna lie, I have a pretty encyclopedic knowledge of most spells, so a lot of it just comes right out of my brain.
It's scary. It's another reason why he does a lot of talking on the shows, because I just rely on him to know pretty much everything off the cuff.
You just need to make like an elephant and suck out his brain. Unfortunately for me, like I do not have encyclopedic memory, and I forget everything. I have terrible retention when I read. I literally read novels and like enjoy them while I'm reading them, and retain it for a little bit afterwards, but then it just like it's gone. And now that we're in like 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, I have so many editions of D&D floating around in my head. I screw things up.
Oh man, yeah. Where did you start?
Tail end of 1st. I had the 2nd printing of the 1st edition Player's Handbook.
Cool.
Wow.
Yeah. For me, I started at the just when 3rd edition came out. So I remember rolling into the local bookstore in my hometown and having heard about D&D, and he's like, well, I just got the new books in, here you go. And that was kind of the I was really young teenager at the time, and so that was kind of like captured my teenage years right there.
I got in much later. I've only been playing for, how long has it been? 6 years?
I've known you for like, 7 years? So probably about that, yeah.
Yeah, so we started with 3.5?
I think I got you guys in with 4th edition, actually, yeah. I've played every edition now for at least a small campaign. I managed to get a copy of the old rule books, and I have a red box behind me that I picked up at Fan Expo one year. And for me, I love the old books. I use them as a major source of inspiration, and reading through those has been a big thing about like informing the way I think about the game. So especially for us that are kind of coming in with the more like the post 3rd edition years of D&D, I like to reconnect with the old editions.
I'm enjoying 5th, and I don't think I would go backwards. Like I've been like kind of like that with all the editions. It's like I kind of like move forward and I never go back. And I take this kind of philosophy into a lot of areas of my life, like the things I loved as a child, and people prove me right on this every time. Is you don't go back and look at them. because they're not going to be good. And you're better off just like having those fond memories of like Thundar the Barbarian. I made the mistake of like trying to make my kids watch it, and within like minutes they're like they're squirming on the floor in agony, like this is so bad, this is horrible. I'm like, this was the pinnacle of cartoons when I was a kid. I had to wait all week for this.
Yeah.
And now it's just all on demand immediately.
Yeah, right into their brains.
Yeah, just it's a huge thing. I think the biggest thing that I go back to for myself is old modules. Because I just love reading some of those old dungeons and modules. I find them to be a lot more, and the newer 5th edition ones are a lot more open-ended, but like you go back into some of those 4th edition modules and even some of the 2nd edition and 3rd edition modules, and they can be pretty linear. We love, I kind of like using a module as a template for a really open-ended game. And Kelly I think will vouch for that, for saying that like I go very seat of my pants in the moment, but that's because I've read the module and I've kind of anticipated all the ways in which it can go wrong, and then I get pleasantly surprised when it goes even worse than I expected.
Which we tend to somehow make it go worse every time. But that's what we do.
It's your job as a player. So mine milked through 20 non-spoiler review, rare on YouTube. 10 Nerdarchy, when we tend to review something, we'll just like, we're going to spoil everything. Because if we tried to do non-spoiler, we would forget. And if I'm going to talk about something, I really just want to talk about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We try to be spoiler free, but we always give like little bits of information and little parts that excited us about modules. So.
When we did our because I think the biggest thing with modules is that usually people that are looking for information on the modules are DMs that are trying to decide, like, is this right for me to run for my group? And so you need to give some spoilers to tell people, like, hey, this is coming up, especially like when we got our hands on Tomb of Annihilation.
And we talked about the T-Rex.
And we talked about that. Like, I've been running Tomb of Annihilation in Adventures League at one of our local shops. And I don't think our video explains just how deadly that campaign is. Because I have killed 5 players in Tomb of Annihilation so far, and it has always been very unfair feeling when it's happened. It's a pretty brutal module.
Nice. Yeah. Well, you know, some people say you can't die in 5e. I guess you're proving them wrong.
No, and actually we're reeling because in our home game right now, we just had our first fatality of a new campaign, and it was pretty tragic. So we're all pretty shocked about it right now.
It was a graphic scene and kind of upsetting. And we're all okay though. Everybody's still happy and still willing to play, so that's good.
Yeah. But that's good. Like when you can invoke emotion in the game, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, whether it's joy. That's why we do this. That's what makes it really awesome. So
our party was starting to feel pretty unbeatable, and then we learned about the lesson.
Nice. Then you got your legs cut from underneath you.
Yeah, more like the head.
Ooh, 100 Years Bore. Any third-party book, splat book reviews in the future can't help but notice the very complete library behind them.
Yes.
Okay.
I think I'm currently DMing a very heavily modified version of the Red Hand of Doom, and it's probably the greatest module ever written for 3rd edition. And so I think once we finish the campaign, we'll do a video review of that as well. And I have a copy of Tome of Beasts and back their Kickstarter for the Creature Codex. So I'd really like to cover some of the Cobalt Press stuff as well, because I think that Wolfgang Bauer is one of my favorite module writers. Whenever I get to look at anything that he's had his hands on, now that he writes for third party too, that's something too.
Yeah, I think the goal always was that we would eventually branch out, but we wanted to make sure that as we got started, that we dealt with a lot of the very specific 5th edition pre-made modules and rules and all of that before we started branching out to some of the other stuff. But there's a lot out there that really excites us that we would love to talk about.
Yeah, I have a pretty complete collection of the 3rd edition era of Dungeon and Dragon magazine. basically from when around the time when Paizo got started with them till they basically got axed and stopped doing that. And for many years, I followed Pathfinder because what Paizo did for those magazines while they were in control of them was amazing. And there's some fantastic adventures in there, and I've used a lot of that in my games. So there might be a video. I'd love to do one, but I need to research it a lot more of like stuff to look for in those old magazines, because you can actually get the PDFs for them on the DMs Guild now, and there's gold in there.
Yeah, that's actually a great idea, as well as the fact that if they're available for purchase for download it, which is great, so you guys can point out and let people know which ones to get and which ones they're into. That's a great niche to fill. I've seen other people do some reviews or talk about old Dragon magazines, which they're a blast. I miss them. It was fun to get that every month.
I miss them a lot too. It used to be I was so excited to pick those magazines up as a teenager, and while there's a lot to read online now, still we're kind of drowning in content when it comes to stuff for D&D. There's probably more modules out there written by really talented writers than you can read, let alone play in your life. So
yeah, like one of the things that I realized when having guests on and talking about Dragon magazines is, like, you're right, we're drowning on content on the internet. We can find anything we want, but what a platform like Dragon magazine or Black Belt or any other kind of magazine you like to look at and read, what they did for us was they gave us that content we didn't know we needed. And until it showed up. So I definitely miss that aspect of a print magazine.
Yeah. At the same time, like, I feel that the way 5th edition has published a lot of adventure modules has made it so that at least as a community, we kind of have shared adventures to talk about. I remember one of the first adventures that I ran was Age of Worms, which was in Dungeon Magazine. And if anyone watching this is looking for the quintessential undead apocalypse campaign, you need to check out Age of Worms, because it has everything you've ever wanted in very scary zombies, and it culminates with basically getting to kill the god of death. So it's a fantastic campaign, and it's totally worth running for your players if you can get your hands on it.
Yeah, and like you guys said, if you guys review those, either DM's Guild or Drive Through RPG, one of those areas definitely has that stuff on there. They also have affiliate programs, so it'd be a way for you guys to let the community help support you, while you went over things that were helpful to them. So that's something to consider as well. Now, Corey brings up something very important here, and it gets discussed here at Nerdarchy quite often. And he just wanted to let you guys know, beards are on point, boys.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
We have Fantasy Grounds College weighing in. And I'm playing virtual tabletop. I am starting to add more dungeon dressing. Do you use these to help with the story and filler development, or do you just wing it and try to recall?
Well, if you check us out on Twitter, we have a very large collection of Dwarven Forge stuff. And so we don't use virtual tabletops in our own games. But this is like my pipe dream. So in my real life, I am a projection designer. So if you've ever seen any of those exhibits where there's projections mapped onto the face of a building, and there's all sorts of funky graphics that fly across the whole thing, I've been really thinking about a way to rig up a virtual tabletop on top of my Dwarven Forge, so I can use all that cool dynamic lighting stuff while we're playing. Because last night's game, I had out our Dwarven Forge, which has LED lights in it, and I just turned off the lights in the room to remind everyone in the group, like, this is a nighttime raid that's happening. So you see this, it's all well lit, but in real life, it looks like really dark. And it did such an amazing effect in the moment that really set the tone for the rest of the evening, which culminated in the death of one of our characters. And so I was thinking about that a lot last night, of like, I wonder if there's a way that I could just hook one of my projectors up over top of my Dwarven Forge stuff and use a VTT to really augment what's happening. But I think I might have to drill into my ceiling a little bit more than I want to do that.
No, but even like setting the mood like that, like when you turn the lights off, I almost wanted to play the whole night like that until I realized I couldn't even see the pieces on the board. But I've never really used a virtual tabletop just because the game that I play in is so much Dwarven Forge. We have way too much accessories.
Yeah, so. I've run some games on virtual tabletops, and I've met some amazing people playing that way. And I must admit that whenever I've tried to do it, my impulse has been to load in all the graphics and to go whole hog. My biggest thing with the VTTs, especially like Fantasy Grounds, is awesome because I know that you can get all the artwork from Mike Schley, so you can actually have the tokens right on the beautiful art that has been drawn for you. And I'm a huge fan also of Dyson Logos, who's a mapper, and he makes his maps and puts them up for free in high res, and they're really easy to import into a virtual tabletop. And just being able to grab amazing art assets for your virtual tabletops, I think, is the biggest thing that a lot of people, it's super, super easy to do. And there's some amazing tutorials out there. We're both a little bit neophytes when it comes to the virtual tabletop stuff, but I think that it's a rabbit hole of all the cool stuff you can do with them now.
It definitely is, and we're like you. Even when we play online, a lot of times we just do theater of the mind, and we're fairly low tech. And I think especially with our style of play where it's all improv. Then having to manipulate a virtual tabletop while you're thinking the story as it's unfolding, it adds an extra challenge. But when I see someone use a virtual tabletop and they're really good at it, and they're using like sound effects and music, and like I've said it many times and I'll say it again, it reminds me of a conductor in front of an orchestra, making all these things happen. So I'm just in awe, like ooh ah.
Yeah, I'm a very improv heavy style as well, which is a point of consternation because I love all my toys. And so I've had to develop a lot of strategies over the years to set up different environments really, really quickly because I've got all these, trees and crazy stuff and miniatures. But I'm very fortunate in that I pretty much have at least one miniature for every monster in the 5th edition monster manual, and enough like dungeon tiles and other stuff that I can usually whip up any environment that I need to. But switching it over is always a hassle, and there have been many, many times when I've prepared out an entire dungeon, and these guys have just been like, "We're not going to go there at all." I can remember one night where they made this whole like underground and everything, and it just didn't happen. They went in a completely different direction with the whole series of events that night, and I was just like, I spent 3 hours setting up this intricate setup, and you guys just went in a completely different direction.
I always feel bad when that happens, but it's funny. Like we won't notice right away. We'll be like discussing what the plans are for the evening, and then I'll be like, oh, we should go to this building and investigate. And then I look at the table and remember that Monty just built this like completely other section of the game, and we're like, no, we're not doing that. And then he has to take 10 minutes to tear everything down, build something new.
The flip side of it, though, that I find is so cool and super rewarding for me as a DM is that the effort that I put building that thing is not wasted because my players know that I am willing to drop everything when they change their minds, and being able to make sure that like they have that agency and control over what happens in the world is really important to me as a DM. And I find that being prop heavy kind of sometimes sets players on the expectation that you have to follow the rails that the DM has so beautifully laid out for us. But I'm willing to just burn all those things away. I took a bunch of photos of it. I'll use it sometime again later. I can set it up faster next time.
I've talked about this before, and I've always said like I'd love to play in that game, but I don't want to be running that game. And we also like bring up that point. It's like, is the GM now locked into these scenarios? Because, well, it's a decision, it's a choice. Obviously, you as the GM go, you know what? I'm not going to force them to do it just because I did this extra work.
Yeah.
But I got to imagine there's a lot of GMs that be like, F you guys. I just spent 3 hours building this. One way or another, you are going through here. Whether I have to murder your characters and drag their corpses through or what.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that Monty has started to do is we have a little Facebook group chat with the entire table that we play with. And at the end of a session, we'll kind of discuss what the party is thinking of doing for the next session. And then like the morning of game night, Monty will just text and be like, just to be clear, what was your guys' idea for tonight's game? Yeah. And we'll like discuss and be like, yeah, I think what we're going to do is we're going to head in this direction. We're going to go to this place that we've investigated. And that gives Monty a better idea on which set to build for the evening.
Yeah. And actually that group chat's been really cool because a fair amount of role playing is happening in that group chat.
Yeah, we talk a lot in character in that group chat, which is
it's really interesting. It's a new thing for all of us, but like normally like you use group chat to just plan the next session, but these guys have actually been on it and been like, you know, can we talk to Kelly's character's father? Or should we, you know, go to the dwarves first or the elves next? And it was really interesting what was happening. And I just kind of sat back and watched it happen and smiled. Like I was super excited because it's like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
That is actually one of the really cool ways that tabletop is kind of like extending beyond the table, and gameplay is continuing even when we're not gaming. Characters are role playing with each other. You know, it's a tool for the GM. It's a tool for scheduling. Mm-hmm. So all that comes into play. We have a question from Andrew. Andrew is, for all three on the screen, have you guys ever DM'd for children? What were the challenges and successes? If no, how would you approach young people players?
I personally never have DM'd. Like I've only been DMing for a little bit. Like I started playing 6 years ago. I started DMing maybe 3 years ago. And I've just been running it for friends. But if I was doing it for a group of kids, like the one thing that I'm very aware of is I would probably have to tone down the amount of violence that I include. Because I like to describe things in detail when people are getting limbs cut off and things like that. So I might have to tone that down and just kind of be a little bit more lighthearted and think more Lord of the Rings than Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I have run games for kids. It's really rewarding and really, really satisfying to do it because it's one of those things where you feel like, wow, I am growing the next generation of gamers. I had a colleague of mine whose son inadvertently discovered the Order of the Stick webcomic, but had never played Dungeons and Dragons. And so we kind of solved that problem with a one-off. And I think for me, the most important thing with children specifically is I think that kids learn D&D best either when they play with their parents or with other children. And that's just my opinion on the matter. You can argue with me. And the only thing that I like to watch out for is that when you do play D&D with kids, it's super, super rewarding. But I would never invite a child to my table with my players unless everyone was super, super okay with that happening. Sometimes I've had, because I do DM Adventurers League, I sometimes do have parents bring their children to the table. And some kids are brilliant kids, and they're totally able to D&D, and sometimes they're not. And so making sure that you talk with the parents of the children, make sure that they're in a great environment where they can feel like they can be kids. So I think the best thing to do it with running a game with kids is get a couple, either a parent, like a few parents and a few of their kids, or a group of kids. I think that the hardest way to bring children into D&D is when they're the only child in the group. And that would be a situation that I would avoid. Because I just don't think it introduces the game to them in the best possible way, unless that kid is really ready for the experience in some other way.
I think kids are great to game with, and like you said, like you have to have the right expectation for the whole table, so that everyone is like knows what kind of game it's going to be, and everyone is there to play the same kind of game. But at the same time, kids don't have the hang-ups that adults do, or you're like, where you tell, you ask an adult what they want to do, and they might look at their character sheet and look for all the options. And then you ask a kid what they want to do, they're just going to tell you what they're going to try and do.
Yeah, they're so imaginative, and they approach things, and oftentimes as well, like they aren't as world-weary and trope-savvy. So, like, you can introduce just like, there's an orc in the next room. What are you going to do? and they love it, and they totally take it in an interesting direction. In Toronto, we have an arts center that runs a D&D camp for kids during the summer, and every year they hire a bunch of DMs to basically run D&D for kids between the ages of, I think, 8 and 17. And from talking to some of the people that have run that, they've basically said it is the best D&D they have ever run in their entire lives, playing with those groups of kids.
Well, yeah, the imagination that comes out is really the core of what makes the game amazing, and kids just have such good imaginations.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff they come up with is way more elaborate and creative than anything I've been able to come up with when I'm playing.
Yeah, and I think that's the number one reason why you want to have them, because oftentimes I find that when kids play with adults, it's actually the adults that stifle the children. And they're like, no, you can't do that, that's against the rules. And so that's why, in my opinion, having them play with their parents or with other children just lets that imagination be free, because sometimes you'll invite a kid into a group where there's one adult that's like, no, I want to have this grown-up experience, and I'm putting my blinders on and I'm going to try to ignore the child, and you got to be careful for that.
Absolutely. There's a website called Playground Adventures where they're geared towards tabletop games for a younger audience, and they make stuff for Pathfinder and 5e D&D. That'd be a great place to check out. I think they even have some free resources over there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And and I guess the other thing is, like, not talking down to the kids you're playing with is a big thing, and treating them like people and not like children. For lack of a better terminology, and just give them a chance. And you might just, like you said, you might have to play Lord of the Rings instead of Game of Thrones, or you may even have to take it down even from there, depending on the ages.
Yeah. The best thing that I've heard is that children are adults, they just have less experience, and kids are really, really smart. You can even put, like, I don't even think it's necessary to dumb down the rule system for children, like, unless they're very small kids. But like, an 8-year-olds will pick up all the rules of D&D just fine. There's no need to simplify it for them. They'll get it, and they'll embrace it in an amazing way. And I think it's so important that we invite kids to games, that we run games for kids, because they're going to be the next generation. And you think about all the formative experiences that we had as gamers that happened between, like, the ages of 7 and 13. It's so important to embrace.
So with that, Corey has a question from Monty. Before you had your beautiful collection of accessories, did you get into DIY stuff at all?
So I will actually say that I have never played Dungeons and Dragons without a Dwarven Forge collection. When I got into D&D, I got into Dungeons and Dragons after I had started playing Warhammer. And so I had a large collection of miniatures right from the get-go. And when I found out about it, somehow the game shop that I was buying stuff from had a Dwarven Forge set. And I bought it for myself with my birthday money when I was like 13 years old. And so my very first D&D campaign was played with Dwarven Forge. But to that end, I do a lot of miniatures painting, which I do consider DIY. I did a lot of conversions for some of my early player characters. Now I don't have as much time to paint like I used to. So now I mostly do pre-painted stuff. But miniatures painting is such a rewarding hobby. I love to do it when I have the time. I have a small Signar War Machine army that I get out and play with. And I do enjoy doing some modeling, but I find that I don't have the time for it. But it's like amazing crafters on YouTube, and I am so envious of the things that they are able to make with their own two hands. It's so cool to see the things that get made, and sometimes I'm like, I wish I could just get them to build stuff for me and I could buy it from them, because I would be willing to do that.
I feel this. I feel the same way. I actually, so well, to an extent, maybe even more so, because I love when 3rd edition they release pre-painted plastic minis. That were reasonably priced, and I could buy it and then have to do nothing. I could just put it on my table.
Yeah. I love painting miniatures, and I usually will paint a miniature for the villain of my campaigns, and like I have a handful of Reaper Bones, and I have my War Games miniatures, but like I'm of the belief, like, because I know like the prices of miniatures and stuff, aside from like Reaper Bones and like the new Whiz Kids minis lines that are like the Nozzlers and the Deep Cuts minis that have come out recently that are really well priced. Compared to War Games miniatures like Warhammer figures and Privateer Press stuff, pre-painted plastic figures are way cheaper. Like I just bought myself a new box of Signar trenchers, and they were $5 each, basically for one 30mm guy with a rifle who's a dude that dies in the first 5 minutes of any game. And in that respect, I have like a bunch of goblins that cost me less than those guys, and they were pre-painted. So pre-painted miniatures aren't as expensive as you think they are compared to other miniature options and alternatives. And I love them a lot. I swear by them.
And if you shop around, you can always find someone that's like dumping their collection for whatever reason. And that's like a gold mine. There used to be someone I would follow, and he'd always have these posts on social media, be like, "Hey, I'm selling my collection," and like you could score a good deal. And then he's like, "Hey, I just scored this great deal," and like restarted his collection. I've seen him do it like 3 or 4 times.
And I will say to anybody that is interested in having more crafting and more miniatures in their games, is when you see people that have collections like mine, or collections that get posted on Facebook groups and social media, just remember that those are collections that have been built up over years and years and years and years of collecting. There is not a single person that went out and spent thousands of dollars on that collection at once. Maybe there's a few rare people that like inherited collections secondhand. But most people that are starting out start small, and it usually starts with getting a couple miniatures for like a player character or a villain, going out and getting like a handful of skeletons, zombies, bandits, and orcs. And usually that's enough to sustain you. Then you treat yourself to one box of miniatures here and there, and after a couple of years of playing, you will have a huge collection too, and you'll be like, where did all my money go? And then you look up on the shelves and you find the answer.
Well, like even for me, I remember one of the first things that you actually gave me when I was DMing was you gave me 7 of these little generic guards holding spears up. And those guys have continued to be my generic bad guys for any humanoid creature.
Yeah.
They've been hobgoblins, they've been orcs, they've been guards, they've been on both the good side, the bad side. They're still like everything, because when I need a whole bunch, I now think I have like 12 of them. Yeah. So if I just need a whole bunch of humanoid creatures, it's always these dudes holding spears, just because I have like a 1/10 the minis that you have.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Well, we do that all the time too. Sometimes it's not even because we don't have the minis that we need. Sometimes it's just because I don't want to look for them, and I just grab whatever and throw them on the table.
That's also true, yeah.
Yeah, I can spend hours organizing mine.
This human knight is an orc now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Garrett Bragg has a question. My party thinks my character is kind of lame, and so does my DM. What can I do to change their mind? Party is a rogue, wizard, and a fighter. Well, first is like, why do they think it's lame? And I hate when other people tell people how to play their characters and what to play and what to do. If you don't think it's lame and you're having fun with it and it's not disruptive at the table, you be you.
Yeah, that's really my best advice. Just people shouldn't put other people's characters down. We have a whole band of strange characters that maybe I don't necessarily agree that is the way I would play that character, but I see the person at the table having a blast doing it. And really just like, if you want some hints and tips, we could come up with a few for like how to make your character great.
Yeah, I think that the biggest, like we actually talk about this in one of our videos, and it's something that we talk about with each other a lot, is that when we make characters, when we make a new campaign or integrate new characters into a campaign, we always like them to have a pre-existing relationship with each other. So in our current campaign, like two of the characters are childhood friends.
Yeah.
Some of them have were, yeah, because he died.
He's dead.
But other ones are brothers-in-law, or we had 2 tiefling twins in our last campaign. And so we find that giving those extra role-playing reasons for why player characters know each other right from the get-go is really, really helpful. And when in doubt, I always like to make sure that, like, as a really good rule of thumb, finding ways in which your character can show courage and bravery, is willing to take risks, and is also willing to work with others, will make sure that your character isn't lame. So, like, if you, and I would ask your friends, like, is there a specific complaint that you have about my character? Like, is it that I'm not engaging with certain situations, or do you just not like the way I'm role playing them? If it's the latter case, well, they can get over it themselves. But if they're like, no, actually, you're being a coward all the time, and you need to, like, try to participate more. So just make sure that they're not saying that you're lame because of that, because that's something that you can actually address yourself. But otherwise, if they just think that your character concept is too wacky or strange, then you want to have more of a conversation about, like, well, I like this character and here's why, and maybe they'll understand a little bit better.
Yeah, so it starts like everything, like half of the questions we get, it starts with a conversation at the table between adults, hopefully, and you can figure it out from there. Or, maybe, and if you kind of agree with them about your characters, then, well, there's plenty of places where you can do research online in order to change things up and expand. And you don't have to do it all at once. I mean, it's a journey, it's a game. Have fun. I wouldn't worry about it. Start introducing little things at a time to your play style if you think that helps. But if you're having fun doing what you're doing, whatever. I'd flip them the bird and keep going.
And if it's not working, like, characters evolve and change, and they should over the course of a campaign. And because that's what's one of the interesting things about human storytelling is seeing the ways in which the situations that a character goes through in their life change them. Kelly's character in my campaign was a bit of a jerk, very arrogant, and prone to making tons and tons of mistakes. But then the situation in the campaign world changed, and he suddenly became a very serious and very determined person. And we talked about that in the role-playing of our chat, is that what has happened to Kalik? Like, this whole situation has really transformed him as a person. And maybe that's an opportunity for your character too, is that maybe the experiences they have gone through have changed them, and they've developed a little bit more, and they have a new outlook on life. And that might give you a new license for how your character can be role-played in the world.
Yeah, my character sheet literally said when I first wrote it, "We'll never back down from a fight." And last game, I definitely ran away from a fight because we were going to die, and one of us did. So those types of situations and the things that happen in the game have really changed what I thought my character was. He's grown up a lot from what I originally wrote him. He was supposed to be just kind of like a guy who liked to beat people up in bars and say he was the best fighter in the whole world. And now he's realizing that maybe he's not, and he has to work with his friends in order to conquer all of these difficult tasks ahead of him.
Yeah, we have a really interesting campaign in that respect. Like, in our campaign world, all of our player characters have living parents, and they can go visit them. They just live the next town over. So there's a lot of intimate stakes that are happening in this campaign. People have siblings, they have real lives, and they've been a part of that campaign. So those opportunities for character development have been really, really awesome in this game.
It's real easy to be a tough guy in a vacuum, but then when you see your buddy literally lose his head next to you, changes a person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're currently evacuating a town, and I described to them, like, this town has 1,000 people living in it, but 400 of them are children. And there was that kind of moment of realization. We were role playing this moment where they were rowing down a river, and this pallor sat over the entire table, like, wow, this beautiful little town is going to get destroyed, and there's nothing we can do about it but run away. It was a really, really kind of pivotal moment, I think, in the campaign.
Yeah. A lot of lessons.
So TrueMate has a question, and I think it was 100 Year Boars, or 100 Year of Boars. I'd have to go back and check. You guys know who I'm talking about, though. Said that he'd never thought to actually follow a module writer And when you guys, because you guys had mentioned Wolfgang Bauer, and there's actually a bunch of them that, to be honest with you, I never really paid attention that much, and until I started talking to a lot of different people and go, oh well, you know what, that is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And also we've had people on the show where I'm like, oh my god, I own so many books that your name is in and never realized it, and it changes the perspective a little bit.
I mean, I'm Monty, and I follow Monty Cook a lot. He's another one of my favorites. I really, really love Numenera, and it's one of those other RPG systems that I would love to get the opportunity to run if I ever got the chance. And I usually find that like that's a really good thing if you're looking for other modules and other books to look at. Look at who the authors were and check out their other work, because chances are if you like what one author does, it's very likely you're going to like the work of that other author. And the inverse is also true. If you read something and you're like, this is not to my taste, because you can see the influences of the writers. Like Monty Cook loves his weird stuff. There's always weird technology kind of underlying whatever he does. And if you are like, I don't like weird technology in my fantasy game, then stay away from Monty Cook.
That's funny. You just validated me, because I've always said Bruce Cordell and Monty Cook from like the 3.5 days and onward is like, if you wanted weird stuff, those were your go-to guys.
Yes, I completely agree.
They were going to introduce, and then there's other people that are just so prolific you don't even realize how much stuff they're in. Like Steve Kenson, I'm familiar with him from Mutants and Masterminds, but then I realized he's worked on like every major RPG property that has ever existed almost.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's a pretty small group of people that actually make a lot of these books, and there's more to it than just like Jeremy Crawford and Mike Mearls that are writing these things, especially when you get down to who's writing the adventure modules and not just the rules. And it's totally worth following up your favorite writers and seeing what they're doing, because you will get amazing ideas.
Yeah, and that kind of makes me think of another conversation I've had with Zach Glazar from Frog God Games and previously Lesser Gnome Games, and that's like, when he listened to people talk and they'd be like praising something maybe he did, but bashing someone else, he's like, hey, that's my friend that wrote that, whether you like it or not. Yeah. And it goes back to what you said. It is a small group of people making all the things.
Yeah, it really is. And like I think in terms of bashing people and bashing writings and stuff like that, that's something that we definitely do not want to do in our own channel. We're fans and we love to gush. And I find that it's a way more positive attitude in this community, especially to be like, these are things that people like, and if you like things like this, you'll like things like this. And reminding people like this person's style is this way, and then people can make the decisions for themselves and say, yeah, weird fantasy really isn't my style. I like gothic horror, so you want to check out these writers instead, right? And that helps make people make better choices and also make better games, because they can tell other players, like, I really want to play in a horror zombie apocalypse campaign. I don't really want to do the whole Game of Thrones political intrigue campaign. And that means that we get to play the games that we enjoy and meet the people that we like playing games with.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody makes like bad modules when they actually write them. It's just different tastes for different people. So yeah, you want to find what you like. But in our channel, every time that we do a review, we try to stay away from what we like, or we do talk about what we like and didn't like, but generally we try to do an overview of like, here's what this offers, here's the type of people that would enjoy playing this.
Yeah.
A lot of times if we do a review on our website, we'll do like the good, bad, and ugly. Because rarely is something all terrible or is something all awesome. There's usually, there's different degrees, different levels, and what you're looking to get out of a particular product.
Yeah. And everything is a potential resource. I think especially like Dungeon Masters, it's really important to remember like the amount of stuff that you need to come up with whole cloth on your own is really, really small. I'm a huge advocate of like steal whenever you can. If you are sitting down and you are drawing a map, I guarantee you somebody has drawn that exact map that is about to come out of your brain, and they have added things to it that you might not even thought about. I'm a compulsive person of like, I go online and I find like, here's a map of a mansion, here's a map of a small town, here's a map of the bottom of a church, and I save them on my computer and categorize them, because it's really useful as an improv style DM. Because if my players are like, well, we want to go to this church now, and I haven't mapped it, I can just go into my folder and be like, here's all my maps of churches, and boom, I've got something that I can work with, and now I have something that I can use as a piece of material when I'm improving. So I find that in general, I say to DMs, instead of prepping a whole bunch of like your own written prose, find out what exists out there, make bullet point notes, and then find ways to use it in your game, because it really can fuel your creativity in unexpected ways.
Yeah, there are so many great mappers out there putting stuff out there. Quite a few of them putting them out there for free as well. I mean,
Yes.
Dyson Logos, the Elven Tower Cartography is another really good one to check out. Then there's I forget there's the guy that does all the maps in for the adventures, which you can find online.
Yeah, Mike Schley.
Mike Schley.
Yeah.
I always confuse him and Mike Shea from Sly Flyers because their names are so similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's like tons of stuff where people are putting it out at a professional level, where if you're just playing in your home game, it doesn't really matter, where you find the maps and what you use, unless you actually enjoy drawing them and feel like you need specific stuff. I wouldn't even bother wasting my time anymore.
There was a great article by Justin Alexander of the Alexandrian, who was talking about how when he tries to publish something, he has to go through his own adventure and make sure that he cuts out all the parts that he stole from somebody else, so he doesn't get accused of plagiarism. And all the professional module writers do it too. They use other material from books, movies, TV shows. They put it together and they remix it in different ways. And really, that's where creativity happens. To me, creativity is not something this in a vacuum. Find something to inspire you to base off of it, and make it your own instead. And it not only does that save you a lot of time, because as a DM, I think finding ways to save time and make sure that your prep is efficient and useful is really important. There's tons of DMs that will spend hours and hours and hours writing lore for their worlds and for gods that the players will never see. And it's great to do that for you, but it might not make it into your game.
So we're well past the hour mark. I just want to give each of you the opportunities for some final thoughts. Guys, as always, in the link you can find, in the description, you can find the links to their social media, to their YouTube channel. Go check them out. They're putting out highly produced, well done videos. They're a young channel and they deserve some love. Go subscribe and watch some Dungeon Dudes. Totally, I like the name of your channel. It gives me that good 80s feel.
Nice.
That was kind of the
That's
idea. Same with
for.
the logo. The logo was supposed to be reminiscent of
some Bill and Ted Excellent Adventure there.
That's what we're all about. Yeah.
Final thoughts?
I think thank you guys at Nerdarchy. You're an amazing channel, and we really look up to you guys and the work that you're doing. Not just because of the beards.
Yeah.
And
we're excited just to be here. Like this is a great opportunity for us, being a relatively new channel. This is kind of the first interview session that we've ever done.
It's been a lot of fun for us. So it was lovely to hear everyone's awesome questions and answer them. And hopefully you'll follow along with us some more, and we can chat with you guys again. We would love to do that too. And we just want to hear stories of people's awesome games, and get more ideas if they have any suggestions or more questions they'd like to hear from us.
Yeah, definitely reach out to us and let us know of videos that you want us to make and that sort of thing. We also, I don't know if we should mention this, but I wanted to say that we're gearing up to hopefully do some live streaming in the next year. So that's
we really don't know what we're doing in that front. So if anyone has any advice for us, we'd really appreciate it.
We're trying to get prepared to do that.
I got some great. Watch some Nerdarchy videos of streaming, and then don't do that. Do something else. It's not our strong suit for sure. But I mean, there's definitely a lot of great streamers out there to check out and see how they're doing things. And there was actually a ton of questions in the chat that we didn't even get to. An hour is just never long enough. Yeah. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you coming on there. Keep up the good work. Spreading the love for the hobby. Too. And until next time, guys, stay nerdy.
Have a good one.